Hello, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
Hey, Craig. And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Paddocks. Today's episode, we're going to be talking about something we've all been waiting for. It's silly season, everyone. Now, covering all things silly, we have Ito, Amy, Meg, Casey, Hannah, and myself, Chelsea. Now, if you're wondering what is silly season, well, Amy has the answer for you.
So, silly season is technically the period during the annual F1 summer break. It's affectionately known as silly season. It's generally that time when rumors and speculation around teams changing their driver lineup start to kick in. I have also heard a few people refer to it as or refer to the driver's market as a merry-go-round, which honestly is pretty damn accurate considering everything that tends to happen. If you're a fan of other sports like American football, hockey, whatever, you've probably also heard the phrase used there. It's just kind of a common phrase used in sports at this point.
And while every single silly season has the potential to be chaotic, there were a few that stood out in recent memory, especially as they caused rather interesting domino effects. An example of this is the 2012-2013 silly season, where Lewis Hamilton left McLaren to join Mercedes. A surprising move that on one hand was thought of as crazy. For more details on why that was thought of as crazy, check out our Lewis episode. On the other hand, it also caused Sergio Perez to end up at McLaren. But in my opinion, now for the motherlode of silly season domino shenanigans. 2016-2017. While this didn't technically happen during silly season, so the summer, it did create its own mini silly season. Nico Rosberg retired from F1 shortly after winning the World Championship, similar to what James Hunt did in the 70s. What made this chaotic, though, was on one hand, he had just won the WDC, so you'd think that he would want to try to repeat the feat, and it also led to Mercedes needing to find a replacement for him stat, which is why Valtteri Bottas was called up from Williams, and as a consequence, Felipe Massa came out of retirement to replace Valtteri at Williams. And another interesting silly season was 2020-2021, where Sebastian Vettel left Ferrari and joined Aston Martin, which was huge at the time because he's been with the prancing horse for so long. And he was always rather close to winning another WDC. However, that move made room for Carlos Sainz to make a move, which in turn caused Daniel Ricciardo to move as well. And is it me, or does Danny seemingly always follow in Carlos's footsteps? First at Renault and then at McLaren? And then, of course, there was last year, 2022, when the big announcement was Seb's retirement. Who doesn't remember Checo's reaction on DTS? I think he embodied all of us on that one.
Ito was definitely not wrong. Sebastian's announcement last year had all of us definitely going, wait, Seb has Instagram? And then all collectively going, oh shit. Silly season this year has kind of kicked off a little early and in a little different way than we've seen in the past. So far, the biggest thing we've seen has been the swap of Nick DeVries and Daniel Ricciardo over at Alpha Tauri. Now, I know people have some really strong opinions about how this all went down, but as we saw last year with Danny, Formula One as a whole is just a cutthroat sport, and things like this happen. When it comes to team silly season, things have really kicked off early this year. Alpha Tauri is set for a rebrand, which, as stated by Helmut Marko, Red Bull advisor, the team will have a new lead sponsor in Hugo Boss. So far for me, the rumored team name needs a little bit of a rebrand already. Again, this is all rumored, as being Hugo Boss Bulls Racing, which for me just doesn't really roll off the tongue the way I'd like it to. But I'm interested to see how everything happens once they go live with the new brand and all of the new sponsors.
Honestly, it seems like Marco should be the president of Silly Season at this point because everything he says is just so out of pocket. But nothing regarding the actual name of Hugo Boss officially joining with Alpha Tauri has been confirmed, but negotiations are still taking place with several companies, including their current sponsor, Orlin, could potentially be the named leading sponsor for the team. So I think they're definitely looking at different options of potentially what sounds the best. As Amy mentioned, Hugo Boss Bulls Racing just doesn't quite sound too right. But it's not just an aesthetic rebrand that will be happening with the team. They're going to be more aligned with the parent company Red Bull and consolidate around their UK aero operation. And in addition, Franz Tost will be retiring at the end of this year, and Laurent Mekies will be coming from Ferrari to take over the team principal role. So like a lot of just behind the scenes changes for that team. I don't know how that's going to work out, but hopefully it will mean that AlphaTauri, or whatever they're called, will be a bit more competitive next year.
Now, another team that has had some shuffling around of some key members is Alpine. News broke at the Spa GP that Otmar, Alan Permain, and Pat Fry all were leaving the team directly after the Spa GP. All left on mutual agreement from what I can find from the team, so no bad blood or anything that's been put onto the internet. I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but nobody seems to know where Otmar will end up. He has said that he is not done with F1 and the F1 world, but I'm curious to see if he will be welcomed at any other team or kind of what will go on. I know I did see an Instagram post of Peroni in the background of one of his posts, so people are like, "Oh, Aston Martin," but we'll see.
I did see a rumor online today that if we see Andretti come to the grid, that's where Otmar will be. I'm not sure 100% how I feel about that combination, but who knows? Crazier things have happened in Formula One before.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious to see not only what Andretti's introduction to the sport will bring, but also like if Otmar's introduced with Andretti, like what that would mean as well. But other than Otmar, Pat Fry is actually headed to Williams to become their chief technical officer for next season. So good for him. Bruno Famin, who is the vice president of Alpine Motorsports, will be the interim team principal of Alpine from the Dutch Grand Prix onwards. And the current Alpine Academy director, Julian Rouse, has been named interim sporting director, with Matt Harmon leading the technical team at Enstone.
And continuing with some team changes for next year. As of next year, Alfa Romeo will return to the Sauber name in their transition to Audi in 2026. There have been reported talks between Alfa Romeo and Haas for some kind of sponsorship deal, but nothing has been confirmed. But it would be interesting if we could see the Alfa Romeo name stay somewhere in Formula One.
Now, sponsors could honestly have their own silly season because things shuffle around like crazy. But we do want to take a look at what you could expect to see this silly season. So to make that a little bit easier, I'm going to run us through who has contracts that are up over the next 2 years. So for 2023, everybody who's got a contract that is up at the end of this year, we've got Lewis Hamilton, Kevin Magnussen, Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, Logan Sargent, and Zhou Guanyu. And then for 2024, we have Charles Leclerc, his teammate Carlos Sainz, Bestie, Oscar Piastri, Checo Perez, Fernando Alonso, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, and Nico Hulkenberg. Now, there is a possibility that we see people who have a 2024 contract looking at extensions. The end of this season, I can definitely see the possibility of Oscar Piastri signing a 1-year extension, maybe even a longer extension with his most recent performance. He's been doing fantastic, and I know that sounds crazy. I'm the Red Bull girl. And I'm actually like really pulling for that silly season moment for him to get that contract extension because I just think the kid deserves it. He's really been pulling out all the stops this season so far. Now, Twitter and the internet alike have recently been blowing up with rumors around who could be replacing Lewis if Mercedes does not up his contract at the end of the year. Those rumors have been wild, people. I'm talking Charles Leclerc being a potential replacement, but those aspirations seem to have been dashed because Charles has been adamant about his commitment to Ferrari, which has been since he joined Ferrari. That's very on brand for Charles. But we've also seen talks about the British team looking to keep their British lineup, and that leads us to Lando Norris. He has shown so much talent since his F1 debut in 2019. His McLaren contract isn't up until 2025, and he has also been pretty adamant about staying with McLaren. There's still a little bit of a possibility that maybe we see Lando join Mercedes in the future. Who knows?
I personally don't see Lando leaving McLaren anytime soon, just because he has said that he wants to stay there and he wants to win with them. He wants to eventually, hopefully, get his first championship title with them. And it's been his dream ever since he was a kid to drive with McLaren and hopefully restore McLaren's glory days eventually in the future. And I think that's possible with the trajectory of how they're going. So we'll see. And he did admit, though, that the thought definitely crossed his mind towards the beginning of the season to leave McLaren after 2025. But he has now said, like, that thought is no longer in the back of his head, and he's confident in the team, and he would like to stay there with the given progress that they've had.
Red Bull also had talks about Norris being like a preferred replacement option for Checo when his contract is up. So, and that was Marco that stated that he would prefer Lando to other driver options. So, in that case, I think Lando is a pretty hot commodity on the track right now.
I do have to say, I really don't see Lando leaving McLaren anytime soon. I'm pretty sure that boy bleeds papaya at this point in his life. But I do have to say, I always get a good giggle during silly season out of Helmut Marko. He has all of the gossip. He knows all of the things. He's just like the source of all silly season every year. I don't know what it is about this man, but it just seems like he's always kind of at the center of it all.
I've also learned to not fully trust anything unless it comes directly from a team or drivers, just because, especially with Lando, he's been rumored to join, I think, just about every team on the grid at this point for 2026, or I don't know, even sometime sooner. Like, have y'all seen the graphic of the 2024 drivers? And it's literally Lando with every single team. He is a hot commodity, like Chelsea said, but I don't know. Rumors are rumors, and I won't believe it until it comes out of Lando's mouth what's happening.
But it looks like that Merc seat won't be opening up quite soon, as it looks very likely that Lewis will sign a contract extension with Mercedes, and he's done last-minute signings in the past, but it's kind of come out that perhaps we might hear something by the end of summer break or at the Dutch GP about an official announcement of exactly, like, is it a multi-year deal? Is it a one-year deal? Like, what is it? But I mean, he stated that he thinks he can continue racing at a high caliber for, at least 5 years. I mean, look at Fernando. He's still going strong. So Lewis is like, why can't I do that? So it looks like we'll hear something more confirmation on that. But I think our Lewis-George duo will be around for quite a while.
Now, I think for me, my favorite rumored replacement for Lewis is the one that's definitely the least likely to happen. I adore Mick, like a whole lot of the PGP girls, but he really is the least likely of the rumors to be Lewis's replacement, though I would love to be shown wrong. He does have that new role as a test and reserve driver for Mercedes, which definitely adds intrigue to his candidacy, along with the legacy that he carries, but I I don't necessarily know if I see Toto putting that kind of pressure on Mick for his return to F1. I don't know. I would love to be shown wrong on this, but I really do think that we're going to see Sir Lewis and Princess George together for at least another year.
And speaking of rumors with replacements, I also want to note that the Red Bull seat will be open after Checo. So I know there's rumors that they're saying, oh, Checo's going to lose his seat because he's behind so many points in Max. I don't really see there being a switch out there before the end of the 2023 season, even if the current silly season rumors are saying otherwise. Because while I do think Red Bull might move away from re signing him after his contract for like a driver, say Danny or Yuki, I don't see them having a replacement mid-season, especially because at this rate, he's just a good teammate for Max's world championship title that I also think we're going to see way earlier than people expect. But speaking of replacement talk, we have an update for someone that's left our grid.
So I don't know if anybody else saw this on the internet, because I did not see this get covered by a lot of other media outlets, but the Dutch outlet De Telegraaf put out an article that was talking about Nick de Vries being set to drive in a demonstration for MP Motorsport, which is the Dutch F2 racing team. And he was even quoted as saying, "It's wonderful to see our sport so alive in the Netherlands. I look forward to seeing everybody." I love that he's still staying involved in motorsport, maybe going back to a happier place, or kind of to his roots, I guess you could say. But I'm just really excited to see what the rest of the year looks like for Nick.
Well, at least part of the next year is kind of confirmed, as Nick stated that he will be taking a negotiation and leadership course at Harvard this September, perhaps taking inspiration from another Formula One driver, Nicholas Latifi, getting his MBA at the London Business School. But hopefully we will see him get like a full-time seat in another racing series, endurance racing. Perhaps we can see him move back to Formula E, or even make a move to IndyCar, like so many previous F1 drivers, Romain Grosjean, Marcus Ericsson, before him. He did do an IndyCar test with Meyer Shank Racing in 2021, so anything is possible.
Well, if we're following up on Nick, we should definitely follow up on Yuki. There have been some reports around Yuki Tsunoda being on the verge of a new deal with Alpha Tauri, or whatever they're going to be called moving forward. The rumors kind of started around the Belgian GP that the RB19 is actually potentially going to return next year, but it's going to be with Alpha Tauri or Hugo Boss Bulls Racing, whatever they're going to be called. It sounds like they're going to be starting to share some of that knowledge within their sister teams. And I mean, I, for one, would love to see AlphaTauri come back with a car with some serious pace, but who knows?
Well, I'm sure AlphaTauri will try to get as close as they possibly can to Red Bull. The FA regulations do prevent a 100% copy. And we've seen some suspiciously similar cars before with Racing Point, or at the time people were calling them Tracing Point because of their pink Mercedes, which was cutting it a bit close with the copying of the previous year's World Championship winning Mercedes car in 2020. So, I mean, there is history of people perhaps taking more than they should from previous championship winning cars, but I'm really excited to see the livery reveal for next year because there's so much change. And maybe we'll see some cool things at preseason testing.
Now, I think the biggest silly season rumor that we all have very strong opinions about so far is the possibility of Ferrari's Mattia Binotto returning to Alpine. When this news hit, I immediately was so not on board with that rumor. I, for one, was thinking about all of the chaos that Ferrari went through with him, and I just really can't see it going well. Yes, people can change, but I would just be a little bit on edge if I was Alpine. I really don't know if he's quite the right fit. I can also maybe see him clashing with some of the people there. Some of the drivers in particular might not be the best dynamic? I don't really know, but I think that's, for me, this is by far the craziest silly season rumor I think I've seen so far.
Yeah, and I think we should just remember why he left Ferrari, and it was poor on track records that were happening, and his relationship with the head leads for Ferrari that was apparently deteriorating very quickly, according to an article I read on Sports Illustrated. Now, if you keep that past in mind, I don't see how bringing that kind of leadership into Alpine, which I like to think could be a good top midfield team, can really help them in the long run. If anything, I think it's going to lead them backwards in the progress they've been able to make with having Ocon and Pierre on the team.
And then people might forget, but Mattia's background is actually in engineering, not in business or marketing like a lot of the other team principals. And he was actually a part of Ferrari's engine team during the successful Schumacher days in the 2000s, and even became head of the engine department in 2013. And being a leader of like an engineering team is a lot different than being a leader of what is basically a company where you have to report to, the executives, but then also report down and like lead a bunch of other teams. And there's a lot of like politicking and communication skills that are really, really necessary. And that's hard enough as it is, but especially in a team like Ferrari where that seems to be an ongoing issue, I think it's just something where it just didn't work out for him being in that role. And that happens. I mean, if anything, I see him perhaps taking a role back on more of the technical side of things in another team. So I think we might see him back on the grid, but maybe not in a team principal role.
Now on to talking about Matthias' bestie, Gunther Steiner, and Haas. Haas is supposed to announce their driver lineup either during summer break or right after the summer break. Gunther said that he does not want to wait until last minute again, like they have done in the past, and they would like to make the decision now. He has said that they have a pretty clear decision on what they would like for their driver lineup. So I'm curious to see if it'll stay the same or if it'll change. Both drivers, I would have to say, are performing pretty well given that they're driving at Haas. Nico may be slightly a little better, but I wonder if K-Mag would step away just because his family is growing and maybe he wants to be more of a dad and spend more time with his kids. I don't know. I guess we should find out soon. So now into some slightly different silly season rumors that deal with IndyCar but also correlate to F1. It has come out recently that Alex Palou is breaking his contract with Arrow McLaren for 2024. He actually wrote a letter to Zach Brown saying that he is no longer going to follow through with his contract, even though, according to McLaren and Zach, Alex has been adamant about racing in Papaya, and he has also received advancements in his pay. There is some speculation with Alex that we could see him potentially drive for Alpha Tauri or Williams in 2024, but his team that he currently drives for, Chip Ganassi Racing, has come out with a statement saying that Alex actually never had a contract with Arrow McLaren and he never was actually supposed to drive there, and he remains under contract with Chip Ganassi Racing, and they are saying McLaren is playing the victim in this situation even though they are the ones that interfered with Alex and his contract. It's just a whole mess. And Alex said that he grew up respecting McLaren and the team, but turns out the new team does not get his respect. And that is what he said in the statement from Chip Ganassi Racing. So I wonder what's going to happen with his reserve position for the McLaren F1 team. I wonder if that's going to go bye-bye. I don't know what's going to happen now. Or we'll see him on the grid. Who knows? But Chip Ganassi Racing did say they are planning on renewing his contract and he will stay with them. So, silly season across the board.
Motorsport silly season is by far one of my favorite things because it is just crazy. You need a murder board to keep track of half of this stuff, I swear to God. But the Alex Palou, McLaren, Chip Ganassi Racing, it's giving me Fiasco 2.0. It's really giving me Oscar last year. It's just crazy. I love that Chip Ganassi Racing is really seeming to stand by Alex and just be like, yeah, no. Here's what's actually accurate. And I'm really excited to see how the rest of the IndyCar season goes for him and how next season goes for him. I think he's got a lot of potential. We might see him in F1, but IndyCar silly season is, I think, almost just as crazy as Formula One. It's always fun to keep an eye on both versions of racing and just kind of see how crazy it all gets.
It looks like this year the IndyCar silly season might be a little bit more entertaining than the F1 silly season. Of course, this whole Alex Pillow situation, it's kind of just like no one knows who has a contract with what and what's real and what isn't. And so far, there's no iconic tweets, but I mean, there is still time. We could have another iconic tweet situation coming. But I mean, it makes sense why Alex would want to stay with Chip Ganassi because he's just dominating the championship right now. So why change that? But he's also no longer working with his management company either. Like, he's just been cutting ties right and left. So I don't know really what's going on. And like Megan said, how is this going to affect his reserve role with the McLaren F1 team? You know, he was expected to run in one of the F1 rookie free practice sessions later this year. And if he's just being like, sorry, McLaren, no more, potentially, like, would Pato then get that drive? Like, how does that, work? But hopefully we can kind of get some clarity with the whole situation as time goes on.
I definitely could see Pato taking that drive, especially since he is one of their other reserve drivers. Or could we see Rossi or Rosenquist be bumped up to the reserve driver role and take that from Alex, since they are the other two Arrow McLaren drivers? I don't know. Or will we have Mick more of a prominence at McLaren as their reserve too, since he is also a reserve driver for them? I do not know what is possible or what could happen at this point.
I would love to see Pato in a Formula One car. I think that would just be really kind of awesome to experience. But I do have to say, I think the most logical replacement is probably Mick. He is technically a reserve for them, so why wouldn't they use him? I don't know, man. You got options.
Well, one thing I do know that is that neither Mick nor Alex will qualify for the rookie session, all driven too many F1 races. So they kind of have to pick like rookies for that. So I think that's why Pato kind of leads that kind of running, because he was never a full-time F1 driver, so he does not have the races under his belt. So staying with Chip Ganassi Racing, rumors are that Marcus Ericsson currently isn't as happy as he could be with the team and is potentially looking for a drive at a different team, perhaps Andretti Autosport. Andretti has stated that they want to have top drivers in all four of their cars, and Marcus is doing pretty well in IndyCar. And continuing with IndyCar as well, we have some more silly season happenings. Dave Malukas will not be staying with Dale Coyne Racing, but has not confirmed where he'll be racing for 2024. But I'm pretty sure we'll see him somewhere. And some big news is that 4-time winner of the Indy 500 and 5-time runner-up in the IndyCar Championship, Helio Castroneves, will be retiring from full-time racing at the end of the year. He'll still be driving the Indy 500 next year for his current team, Irish Shank Racing, but he will be replaced by Ricky, who just kind of debuted at the Toronto GP, and Indy Lights champion Tom Blomqvist. So the fellow Swede and fellow Quist last name, I guess, Felix Rosenquist, Arrow McLaren, currently doesn't have a contract for 2024, but with Alex not racing for Arrow McLaren next year, and him putting in a pretty good performance, could he potentially get the chance to stay with Team Papaya? So it'll be interesting to see what the IndyCar 2024 grid ends up looking like, because there's a lot of rumors and moving around there.
Yes, seems to definitely be more chaos and more happening with IndyCar silly season, but now back into F1 silly season. Joe is hoping to hear about his contract with Alfa Romeo at the end of summer break and if he will return to the grid for next year.
I would hate to see Joe go, but I also can't really think of like any team that would bring him on if his contract wasn't extended with Alpha right now. Especially with the way that we're looking at other drivers' contracts, I feel like they have higher priority in being picked over Joe.
Current team principal, who's not technically the team principal, Alessandro Alumni Bravi, has stated that they want to continue with both Valtteri and Joe for 2024, and that they're hoping to come to an agreement soon with a potential formal announcement around the end of the summer break Zandvoort GP. So it sounds like the team kind of just wants to keep the status quo for the time being, but we shall see how those contract negotiations turned out.
And on the top of status quo, I know everyone at Merck is all about Lewis, and I mean, rightly so, but remember, Toto's contract is also up. Could we see a shakeup there? While I don't see anything crazy happening, after all, he led the team to 8 constructor titles, 7 driver titles, and so much more. Plus, he's part owner of the team. At the same time, Jack, his son with Susie, is getting older. And there have been rumors earlier in the season that because of this, he would step aside. So, who knows? While the part of my heart that beats Silver, yes, a Tifosa can support more than one team, hopes that Toto stays with the team at the end of the day, I don't know.
Now, I can really see Toto retiring with Lewis kind of as like a package deal. They both joined Mercedes at the same time. You know, they went through that whole just Mercedes destroying everyone and then back, the dip with the new regulations and building it back up. They're kind of like entwined, their fates almost. So I can really see like whenever Lewis decides to call it quits, that's when I think Toto might decide to call it quits. And it could almost be like a changing of the guard to a new generation. Like the new lead Brit would be George then, which would be crazy, but kind of the new era of Mercedes.
So now on to what we predict could happen in the future this season, kind of like all of our crystal ball moments in what we see happening. So I don't know if this would happen, but if Logan doesn't start to perform well at Williams, I could honestly see Mick taking his seat next year. I know it is not like ideally where Mick would like to be, but it is a seat back on the grid and it would still have ties to Mercedes. I would like to see him back on the grid because I don't think he got a fair chance at Haas, and everyone still compares him to his dad, which isn't fair. So I'd like to see him kind of get another shot with a team where he would have the support that he didn't have. And other than that, I honestly don't see much shuffling happening for next year, since, in my opinion, all of the drivers are performing pretty solidly for their teams, for like the cars that they're given. So I don't know. I do wonder though if Haas would ever make Pietro Fittipaldi their official driver instead of just a reserve, since he is a pretty solid driver and did perform well at the Le Mans this year with his team, and he is still somewhat young. And I would love to see Pietro on the grid since he deserves it, and I love him, and I love his little brother too. But the year to honestly watch out for is next year and 2025, since that's where more of we see contracts ending and kind of the big names potentially switching and their contracts being up. And that's when we will have more teams projected to enter F1, giving more options for seats. So I'm excited for the silly seasons to come because I don't think this one is going to be your typical silly season, but I think we will get them in years to come.
Now, I do have to agree with Megan. I love the idea of seeing a Fittipaldi back on the Formula One grid, but that's just because there's so much history that comes with that name. But that's a whole different story. I think for me, my favorite potential silly season prediction, if I had to pull out my crystal ball, is the possibilities that lie with Alpha Tauri or whatever the heck they are going to rebrand as. I love the possibility of them using some of the specs of the RB19 for a similar build next year. Something that I can just really get behind is just the sharing with the sister teams. And I would love this to see Danny still be with them, see him in a car that has some actual pace and just have a field day with it. But I also just really want to see Danny in a Red Bull Rocket and just have some fun with it with other people to race, not just like take it out, do some tire testing. I want to see that man to race that car. And while we all know that Checo's contract is still going on with Red Bull, and they have said repeatedly that they have no plans to change their driver lineup, we've always heard that, and things always change. It is what it is. I would just really love to see Danny back at Red Bull. I would love to see Maxwell 2.0. I think it would be fantastic. And I would love to see Liam Lawson, who's currently driving in Super Formula, joining Alpha Tauri and teaming up with Yuki. I think the two of them together could just be a fantastic pairing. Liam's got so much potential, and I think giving Yuki the opportunity to take on more of a mentor role could just be really good for him, and I think it would help him grow as a driver. I think it's the right move, but we'll see what happens. Now, when it comes to Alfa Romeo for me, I kind of actually see them having only one seat open, and that's Valtteri's. I think Joe is going to stay. I don't see them getting rid of him anytime soon. But unless Valtteri comes back from summer break, like massively reinvigorated, it just kind of seems like his passion is pulling him in a different direction right now. That's totally okay, but my prediction is a little crazy, I guess, to some people. I would love to see them bring back Italian Jesus, also known as Antonio Giovinazzi. I think it would be really great to see him back on the Formula One grid. He did a fantastic job at Le Mans with Ferrari's hypercar, and I just think he deserves a better chance with a Formula One team.
In terms of what I can see happening for this year, or rather next, I would say Lewis stays put. Even if the Lewis/Ferrari rumors got me excited early on. K-Mag, while he's a solid driver, Nico is outperforming him so much that maybe his contract will not be renewed, but at the same time, I don't see him like willingly leaving Haas at the end, especially if Günther's past moves have been any indication, because we all know that man is unpredictable. Danny, while I love to see him back, and he has had some solid showings in Hungary, I do think it's too early to predict whether he will stay on the grid for 2024. And honestly, same for Yuki, because although he had a solid start of the season, and even though I said at the beginning as well that he would be gone by the end of the season, I must admit I'm reconsidering because of those strong showings. But then again, because he just got a new teammate, I don't want to predict just yet. Logan, he's still sitting at 0 points. And while Williams is no Red Bull/Alpha Tauri in terms of canning drivers, after only a handful of races, I don't see him at Williams that long. Unless he really starts performing, especially if they have someone like Mick that they could call up. And as for Joe, he hasn't been remarkable this season. But at the same time, he wasn't bad either. So I honestly don't know whether he will get an extension or not. It feels like it will depend a lot on how the title sponsorship change will shake out.
I always like the time after the silly season because we start kind of getting a little more excited for the championship end. And we start seeing these contracts and these details that start coming out. So here are my final guesses, my crystal ball in hand. For those who are going to stay for the same lineup, I see McLaren, Red Bull, Haas, Aston Martin, and Alpine. Those contracts and teams, I feel like they seem to work in favor for everyone right now. The other teams, I really think all of that is up in the air because Danny will either be stuck at 8T or who knows, maybe given Checo's seat, which, like I said before, I think is a wild opinion and I don't really see happening. Logan and Zhou, wild cards, if they even stay in F1. And then Carlos and Ferraris, look, they're having like a cat fight right now. I think they're going to reconcile. They're going to be just fine. But technically, that's still in the air. And then we have Lewis. So I don't think Lewis is a wild card. I think Ferrari's offer to Lewis was more of like a power move saying, hey, we can offer your driver something, rather than really caring if he accepted, because they knew Lewis was going to stay with Mercedes. So if anything, I think this offer is just actually going to help Lewis secure a better contract with Mercedes. But with Lewis's request for the amount of money he wants and the contract time length that he was, plus supposedly some after contract things, I can see this being a long negotiation with possibly the public just not even knowing the full extent of what was in the contract. But that's my full report of it.
No, I don't think much about the grid will change for 2024. I can see both Haas and Alfa Romeo keeping both of their drivers since they're pretty solid. They're good, safe midfield drivers. But with the Audi takeover coming closer and closer every year, I can see them eventually wanting to get a top driver in one of those seats before 2026. But I don't think they're quite there yet. And I think Lewis staying at Mercedes is pretty much a sure thing. They're just dragging out as long as humanly possible. I mean, in reality, where would Lewis go? There's not really any open top seats at all at the moment. And he has a pretty good thing going for him at Merck. And it honestly seems like the fans are more stressed out about his contract than he and Toto are. But in regards to Logan at Williams, I think they're probably going to keep him around for maybe one more year, but have some performance clauses in that contract. They did invest in him in their driver program, and he really is only a rookie. It took Yuki 3 seasons for us to be like, oh, wow, Yuki's doing pretty good. I mean, the kid's only been in there for like not even a full year yet. So I think he deserves a little bit longer. And, Williams is not Red Bull, and Logan's young. So I think another year, learning from Alex and kind of being with the team will kind of determine what his future is going to be with in F1 if he gets to stay. The Alpha Tauri, I think, is the real wild card, as the whole team is just going through massive changes next year. And, would they want to bring a new driver to just kind of start fresh? So with Liam Lawson, who's doing really well, and I think definitely deserves a seat at some point in time. Or would they want to keep some stability and just keep Yuki and Danny on so that stays the same and have some stability during the chaos of all the changes? I do think that the most likely scenario is that the lineup just stays the same, but, it's Red Bull. Anything can happen. I think Checo would be the domino that would set off kind of any major changes within the Red Bull organization. And if Red Bull does crazy Red Bull things to, get rid of Checo for 2024, I can see either Danny or Yuki stepping up, opening a seat at AlphaTauri for a rookie, but I think that's extremely unlikely.
And now on to probably my favorite part of our episodes, our pre-outro. So today we're going to just do a driver quote. And our driver quote is going to be, as a Formula One driver, your dream about winning your first race is all your life. I am desperate to know what it feels like. Sergio Perez. Don't worry, Sergio. We would like to know what it feels like too. Just throwing that out there. And I don't know about you, but I love a bit of silly season, especially talk on Monday. What do you think will be the biggest shock of silly season so far? Let us know on our socials. Everywhere we are Paddock Girls Podcast, except Twitter. We are Paddock Girls Pod. And also, don't forget to share, rate, and review the podcast wherever you listen, like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those fun things. The countdown to Lights Out continues. 13 days to go. Thank you so much for joining us in the paddock. See you next time. Bye, Craig.
Hey, Craig.
See ya, Craig.
Bye, Craig.
Okay, bye.
Bye, Craig.